The disappearance of Sherri Papini made headlines when she first went missing in 2016 from her town of Redding, California. People were extremely concerned from the get-go when this white blonde mother of two went missing when she was last seen jogging, and it was even more interesting when she miraculously showed up 22 days later. And in 2022, the Sacramento Federal Court announced that they were charging Sherri Papini with crimes related to faking her kidnapping and fraud. So yes, this was a fake abduction, which she actually admitted to last week. She finally came clean and said that she faked all of this. And I am going to be talking about Sherri's behavior mostly in this video. If you are looking for someone to describe in detail what it was like when Sherri first went missing and what the search was like, and then what she said that her kidnapping and torture were like, then I'm going to list some other YouTubers down in the description box, because I'm mostly going to be talking about what happened once Sherri returned. At the time of her disappearance, Sherri was a 34-year-old mother of two, and she was married to Keith Papini. He worked in like home repair or like IT or something, and he made house calls. And Sherri had a part-time job but was let go. Sherri was described by people in her town of Redding as a, quote, supermom. That is the exact phrase that somebody used to describe how she always went above and beyond at events and at these different kinds of like dinners and like bake-offs that they would have. Somebody said that she wouldn't just make a pie crust, she'd make the best pie crust. And looking back, I'm really curious. This is just a random theory that I just thought of. Looking back, I'm really curious if she even made these pies, since she has proven to be such a liar. I wonder if she just like bought a pie from the store and like put it in like a baking tin that she already had at home. On Wednesday, November 2nd, 2016, Keith receives a text from his wife asking if he's going to go home for lunch. And he was hard at work, so he didn't see this text until hours later, and he responded like, sorry, busy day, I won't be coming home. So when he returns from work as scheduled, he expects to see Sherri and their kids at home and is kind of miffed when he sees that they're not there. But he also is thinking like, well, maybe she picked them up and ran some errands or something like that. So he calls and she doesn't pick up the phone, and then he also does the Find My iPhone function to where he can see where her phone is on a map of their surrounding area, and he finds that Sherri's phone is near their neighborhood mailboxes. These are shared mailboxes, actually really similar to the Catherine Corzelius case that I just covered before this one, where like the whole neighborhood has this like mail center at the front of the neighborhood, and that's where you get your mail. She had also recently taken up jogging, and he was wondering if like maybe she was at the mailboxes or if she was out on a jog, but he like did a quick loop through their neighborhood and didn't find her. He also calls the school, and this is when he gets really worried, because he calls the school and they're like, yeah, your kids are still here. So Keith calls 911 to report his concerns, and I'll play the call now.
Yeah, so I just got home from work, and my wife wasn't there, which is unusual, and my kids should have been there by now from like daycare. So I was like, oh, maybe she went on a walk. I couldn't find her, so I called the daycare to see what time she picked up the kids. The kids were never picked up, so I got freaked out, so I hit like the Find My iPhone app thing, and it said that it showed her phone like at our end of our driveway. We don't have really good service.
Okay.
Not the end of our driveway, but the end of our street. So I just drove down there, and I saw her phone with her headphones because she started running again, and I found her phone, and it's got like hair ripped out of it, like in the headphones. So I'm like totally freaking out, thinking like somebody grabbed her.
Okay, what's your address?
Redding.
What's your last name?
Yes. Papini, P-A-P-I-N-I.
And your first name?
Keith.
K-E-I-T-H?
Yes.
Okay. Did you go pick up your children?
No, I'm going to call my mom and have her do it.
Okay. What's your wife's name?
I'm going to like knock on every door. Sherri. S-H-E-R-R-I.
And same last name?
Yes.
She white, female?
Yes.
What's her date of birth?
It is June 11th, 1982.
Is her vehicle there?
As he says, several neighbors saw her jogging, and he also walks along her jogging route and he finds Sherri's phone along with her headphones with the cord. Sherri did not have clout. She did not have AirPods. She had the cord, and he finds this laying on the ground and he takes a photo of it before he picks it up. And he even says in the 911 call that he found the phone with the headphones like curled up on top of the phone, and he is actually the one who points out that this is kind of odd. It looked almost like the phone was placed there. You'd think that if somebody was grabbed and their phone was thrown away from them, that the phone would land and then the headphones would be like strung out along the ground. But he immediately points this out as being weird. And that actually adds to my personal theory that Keith was not in on Sherri's disappearance. But I will explain that later in the video. So the general feeling of the public is that Sherri was snatched when she was out on her run, and the community comes together to try to search for her. Of course, this is extremely concerning. She has 2 kids. She is like this kind of all-American mom. So immediately people began to feel emotion towards Sherri and towards bringing her home, because it's actually called missing white woman syndrome, and it's when a white woman, specifically a blonde woman, goes missing, and immediately there's a bunch of hubbub and people are freaking out saying like, bring her home. And a GoFundMe raises just under $50,000 to, quote, bring Sherri home. As everyone is searching, they can't find anything. The police can't find anything. Search parties can't find anything. And Keith is upset with the police because he feels like they're not doing enough. And Keith is doing a bunch of media appearances, and the police are actually like asking him not to do these because they're worried it's going to bring like almost too much attention to the case, and it'll make whoever has her freak out and then just like kill her because it's like gotten too big. And it's Keith, an anonymous donor who donates $50,000, and then a private investigator who are trying to do this like stunt kind of where they're asking Sherri's kidnapper to anonymously drop her off somewhere, and then they're saying that they'll drop the cash in another location. When asked about his wife, Keith says that they met in middle school and then reunited later in life as adults, and this is when they fell in love. He also details to the police that they had only had one real fight in their marriage and that it was over a dirty room, but he also tells the police that Sherri can get loud when she's angry and that she knows how to push his buttons. November 24th, Thanksgiving. On this day, Keith had organized a balloon release for Sherri. Okay, I feel like dust keeps coming in front of the camera. I just feel like I'm having the most like ratchet setup right now. So I'm sorry about that. So flash forward to 22 days later on November 24th, which is Thanksgiving. Keith is having a really hard time. People who've lost loved ones often really struggle around the holidays because you're just kind of missing them more and wishing you could spend the holiday with them. And he organizes a balloon release for Sherri to just kind of try to like raise everyone's spirits. But miraculously, Sherri is seen on security footage running around frantically along the interstate and in front of a church, which is where they got the security camera footage. A woman sees Sherri practically run in front of her car. She swerves out of the way and then calls the police to get Sherri help. She does not stop her car, which is actually the smart thing to do. You shouldn't stop. You should like call 911 if you're concerned, but getting out of your car could like potentially put you in danger. So the police arrive and they see, yes, missing person Sherri Papini is standing right in front of them in a horrid state. She has a chain around her waist and her wrist. She's covered in bruises and blood, and she has an extremely haggard appearance. This is also 146 miles south of where she disappeared. You know, this is like a miracle. Sherri's captors have released her and she's home in time for Thanksgiving. This is extremely rare for kidnapping cases, and this is where people's eyebrows kind of start to raise towards Sherri. So Keith goes and visits her in the hospital, and he reports on her condition as being relatively fine. A lot of her injuries were superficial. Her, quote, signature blonde hair was cut short. I feel like you only have something as a signature look if you're an actor, but he calls it her signature blonde hair. It was long and it's been cut short to a bob. She has bruises that are varying colors, which means they're from different days. She's lost a lot of weight, like 20 pounds. And she also, most concerningly, has a brand on her shoulder that says Exodus. And it's done kind of like in a messy way, and the police officers are having trouble reading it. But then Sherri is like, oh, I think it says Exodus. And it's like, how would you know that that's what it says if it's on your back? But she is also wearing her original underwear and then different clothes. It was like a very nondescript, like sweatshirt and sweatshorts. The investigation continues, and of course, the police want information on human trafficking, which it seems to be this is the situation that she was in. So of course, they take her clothes and they swab her for DNA. Sherri is found with both male and female DNA on her, neither of which matched her or her husband. The FBI also runs the DNA through their database, and they don't find any matches at the time Sherri returns. So on her first day home, Sherri does not want to talk to the police at all. So a lot of the information that they gather is from a recording device that Keith secretly holds. One of the very first things that the police find suspicious is that Sherri says to her husband, they're questioning me about my disappearance and they're writing down everything that I say. And she was really concerned about the fact that they were doing this, but it's like, yeah, you were the victim and survivor of a violent crime. Of course, they're going to be asking you questions. And ideally, a survivor from a kidnapping situation would then want to give the police enough information to find their kidnapper and put them behind bars. So I think the police, especially the Shasta County Sheriff Tom Basinko, they're immediately suspicious of Sherri, and they can't even get her to really talk to them. So that's why they're having to rely on Keith. So after having a conversation with Sherri, Keith's recorder tells them that Sherri says that she was held by two Hispanic women who either wore masks or forced Sherri to like crouch down so that she wouldn't see their faces. She purposefully pulled out her own hair when she threw her phone on the ground so that it could be like a clue for investigators. She also says that when she was originally out on her run, these two women pulled up in a van beside her and she sees that they're trying to talk to her. So she takes her headphone out of her ear and turns to them, but then one of them pulls out a gun. So she willingly gets in the car with them under the threat of being shot, and she says that the kidnappers made her lie down and that she kept falling asleep in the car, so she doesn't really know where they took her to. It takes Sherri over a year before the police get enough information to draw a sketch of her captors. Here are the two sketches side by side. Sherri described the younger Latina woman as having thin, almost penciled in eyebrows, and then, quote, those really big hoop earrings. A little stereotypical there. And then she describes the other woman as being older with bushy eyebrows. The room that Sherri was kept in was described as a room with no windows and a pole that was sticking out from the carpet of this room through to the ceiling. I'm assuming it was like a pipe that would help like carry water or something, and she was chained to that pole. She also says that these kidnappers spoke mostly in Spanish, but they did tell her that she had a buyer, which insinuates that this is a human trafficking situation, and that the buyer is a cop. So nobody's going to be looking for her. And in fact, the people of Redding, California think that Sherri voluntarily left. So there's no hope for her to get justice because nobody is looking for her. Over the next 3 weeks, Sherri is continuously beaten by these women, and she is fed leftover rice and tortillas. She is mostly kept tied up in this room that's dark. She can't really tell what's going on. And she also says that the people, her captors, played this, quote, loud, annoying Mexican music so that nobody would hear her calls for help. Well, you'll see. Sherri has a problem with the Hispanic community, and I'll talk about that more later. Sherri also tells the police that these kidnappers let her shower one time during her 22 days in captivity, and this is where her story kind of starts to fall apart. It's like the devil is in the details. So she says that when she's in the bathroom, she ends up getting into an altercation with one of these women and cuts her foot. On her last day of captivity, the women are arguing in Spanish with a man's voice. So she's assuming there's 3 people. Sherri hears gunshots, and then one of the women comes in and says, "We're letting you go." They put a bag over her head and push her into a car, where she's later pushed out onto the street, which is where our story picks back up with the security cameras. So, in asking her questions about this story, the police start to notice some inconsistencies. Like I said, Sherri said that she got into a fight with her captors and she scraped her foot. But they look at her foot and there's no open wound and there's also no scarring. They also give her an x-ray and there's no injuries to her feet. So they're wondering, if she's lying about this foot injury, then what else is she lying about? Another inconsistency in Sherri's story that the police pick up on is this whole showering situation. So when she first told them that she was allowed to shower, she says that she showered wearing her underwear, and that is how she washed her underwear. But then another time when she was talking about showering, she said that she took the underwear off and like hand washed them under the running water. Like, I think it's normal to have gaps in your memory after coming back from a traumatic situation, but there's just these really random details that Sherri is going into that the police are noticing change every time she's asked. And then also, the sad fact is, if you are being held captive by somebody, they very rarely let you go, especially for 22 days. A lot of the time, if it gets to a situation where the captor feels like too much publicity is surrounding this case and that they need to rid themselves of it, they'll just kill the person that they're holding captive. And like, that's the sad reality. It's what a lot of people think happened with the Brittany Drexel case, which I also did a video on. It was my first video actually on this channel. So while the police are getting suspicious of Sherri, she applies to the California Victim Compensation Fund, and over the next few years, she receives around $30,000 in multiple payments, which she uses for therapy. They also move houses, which makes sense, honestly, regardless of whether she was lying or not. Keith also drains the $49,000 from their GoFundMe account, and he uses it to pay off credit card debt. He also makes an online deposit of several $1,000s from this GoFundMe into Sherri's personal bank account. In their new house, Sherri stays under the radar. She hardly ever goes outside, and to this day, Sherri has not made any public interviews or done any sort of public appearances. The police originally sparked public scrutiny when they say that when she was originally found, Keith was not a suspect, but they specifically say that Sherri has not been ruled out. And that was kind of the first inkling that there was more to this story than people originally thought. Internet sleuths also find a post from 2003 on a racist website called Skinheads with a Z, and this was a blog submission made by a Sherri Grafe, and Grafe is Sherri's maiden name. In 2003, she was not married at this time, so this website is now defunct, but you can still find the blog if you do enough digging. I'm not going to read this entire blog. Dreading, the YouTube channel, read the entire thing on their video on Sherri, and like I said, I'm going to be linking it below. So in this blog post, Sherri says that when she was in high school, she frequently got into fights with Latinos who claimed that she was racist and would call her a Nazi. She also says that they bullied her because she was, quote, drug-free, white, and proud of her blood and heritage. There's just plenty of issues with this blog. First of all, none of it really sounds believable. It's all extremely dramatic. She says that like at her track meet, she starts to beat one of the girls up and like breaks her nose and gives her a concussion, and 3 people have to pull Sherri off of this girl. She also, makes that claim about them bullying her because she's drug-free, which when I'm thinking back to my high school days, being somebody who also like wasn't in with the drug crowd, they didn't bully you because you didn't do drugs. They just kind of ignored you and thought you were a nerd. So I don't really understand why they would just go out of their way to make this girl's life hard. This post is from 2003, not 2016 when Sherri rose to be in the public eye. So it would be hard to fake, and her family has come out saying that she doesn't hold any prejudice towards the Hispanic community and that this post was put up to make her look bad. As part of their investigation, the police go around to friends and family members of Sherri, and they find that a few people have pretty negative things to say about her. The recurring theme among their interviews is that Sherri was the kind of person to lie for no reason and to make up stories where she could play the victim and get sympathy. There's a December 2003 police report by Sherri's mom, Loretta Grafe, who alleges that the then 21-year-old Sherri had been harming herself and blaming it on her mom. There's also a separate incident where her sister accuses Sherri of kicking in her back door and attempting to steal stuff from her house. And then her dad also says that at one point, Sherri stole cash from him, which she later returned when he threatened to get the police involved. These were all incidents that occurred when Sherri was like a late teenager and then like early 20s. So Sherri was 34 at the time of her disappearance, and it seems like she hadn't really matured that much. The official criminal complaint, where I'm getting a lot of this information from, and again, I'll link that down below, it's 50 pages and it just does a deep dive into all the problematic stuff that Sherri did during the investigation and in her past. The official criminal complaint says that Sherri also married her first husband because she needed his medical insurance. So apparently at this time, Sherri was having some sort of health issue having to do with her heart, and she needed health insurance to treat it. So she married a guy who was in the military, and because he was on tour, they barely saw each other, and they had really only hung out a handful of times. They divorced amicably when Sherri told him that she was in love with another man. They also speak to another ex that says that he met Sherri at a youth program back in 2001. And this is when he was 15 and she was 20. Hello? He described Sherri as an attention-hungry person who made up stories of abuse about her family and then about him after they broke up. The youth minister from this same program said that Sherri was good at creating different realities for people so that they would see what she wanted them to see. So a lot of people from her past are kind of calling Sherri out for lying about all these random things. One of her ex-boyfriends even went so far to say, "I bet you anything that girl is fine," when he first saw that she went missing.
She's a compulsive liar. She would not talk to you for 3 or 4 days, and then all of a sudden there'd be some fantastical story about what happened.
Shaheen Davari says he dated the mom when she was a 20-year-old youth counselor. Get this, he says he was just 15.
In retrospect, sure, tons of red flags, right? But she was a counselor that was going out with a 15-year-old kid.
Now 35, the professor of communications says Sherri's lies were never ending. For example, she kept insisting she was a skilled surfer.
I surfed all the time when I was 15, 16 years old. It's something that I really enjoyed doing, and she told me that she surfed as well. There was always an excuse as to why she couldn't go surf, and she had to have her surfboard that was at her house but didn't have any pictures.
He says there was also a mystery medical condition.
This is all circumstantial evidence until a DNA match is finally found for the male DNA that was found on her underwear. So CODIS found the sibling of a man who lived like 1,000 miles away who happened to be Sherri's ex-boyfriend. His number was saved in her phone under a woman's name. Sherri actually had several men that she was talking to, and all of them were saved under female names in her phone. So the police show up at this particular ex's house, and he basically is like, yeah, guys, I wasn't gonna go to you myself, but I've just been kind of sitting here waiting to spill the tea when you guys finally reach out to me. And he invites them into his home, and he gives them quite the story. He says that he and Sherri originally broke up pretty amicably, but then he was cleaning his house in 2016 and found a box of her stuff, which he then sent to her mom. Sherri then reaches out to him over text, and they start getting in contact again. She tells him that she's miserable in her marriage and that Keith regularly beats her and rapes her. They're first texting, and then they move to letters and burner phones. So Sherri is saying that because of her horrible abusive husband, she needs his help to escape this situation, and she needs him to be the one to pick her up. So Sherri goes out on her jog, and she walks to the location that he's supposed to pick her up at, and she drives this 8-hour drive laying down in the back seat, not even getting out to go to the bathroom. And when she gets to his house, she asks him to board up his windows, and she basically just sits in his bedroom alone. He said that Sherri barely ate anything in this 22-day period because she told him that she was trying to lose weight. She also is acting pretty odd. Not only is she sitting alone in a dark room by herself this whole time, but she's also injuring herself. Sherri would hit herself, bash her head against objects so that she would have bruises and cuts. She even asked this ex-boyfriend if he could hit her, and he said no. Smart guy. She eventually does convince him to brand the word Exodus into her back using a wood-burning tool that she instructed him to buy from Hobby Lobby. But on November 24th, Sherri said that she missed her family and wanted to go home, and that is when he did the 8-hour drive back to California and dropped her off along the highway. The ex-boyfriend gives the police a tour of his house, and he shows them the room that looks exactly like the one that Sherri described, with the carpet, the vertical pole going up to the ceiling, and then it had windows, but they were boarded up at the time. The boyfriend says that they did not have sex during her stay with him, but his DNA was found on her underwear, so I'm not really sure about that. He was under the impression that because he had helped her out of this situation, that they would eventually start dating again. I'm not really sure. I mean, he's sitting in the living room watching TV, and Sherri's over here bashing her head against the floor. I'm not really sure why he wasn't more suspicious of her, but it seems to me like Sherri purposefully surrounds herself with submissive men that are going to go along with her lies and schemes. It seems like this guy was falling for it. I mean, from what I know, Keith has not divorced Sherri as of yet, so it seems like Keith either was originally in on it, or he at least was in on it once Sherri got back. My theory is that Keith didn't know about any of this until she returned home, but she managed to talk him down and talk him into participating in this fraud with her. So in March 2022, Sherri was arrested for fraud related to financial gain from this hoaxed kidnapping. At this arrest, they managed to catch her when her kids are like going in for like violin practice or some sort of like rehearsal sort of thing. And they first tell Sherri that there's an issue with her car outside and they need to step out because they're trying to do this in like a quiet, civilized way. But then, of course, Sherri, being the dramatic lady she is, she screams, she throws her phone, she tries to run away from the police, and they have to like tackle her and put her in handcuffs in front of a crowd of people, including her kids. The family released a statement about this arrest, saying that this gave them all trauma and that it was very unnecessary on the police's part. But I think that the police have actually been extremely reasonable in this case. They were suspicious of Sherri from 2016 when she first went missing, and they were just secretly doing all of this research so that they could build a case to arrest her. She was held on a $120,000 bond, which she paid, and she was released under the condition that she would give up her passport and any firearms that she may own, and she also has to stay in a certain area of California. Sherri did make one public appearance, and this was at her mandated court date, and she is seen here running from photographers. It was also announced the day after I sat down to film this video that Sherri agreed to plead guilty to 1 count of making false statements and 1 count of mail fraud. She also has publicly come forward to apologize to everyone who was hurt by her fake kidnapping. I mean, she had to have known. This reached international headlines. Like, people all over the world saw that this woman was missing, and then there's the whole woman that called 911 for her. There's all these people who donated to the GoFundMe. Like, people were coming forward to support her because they trusted her and because they cared about her, and Sherri lied to all of them. Most of all, I would be upset as the family member. Like, faking your own missing persons case, like, if somebody is missing for more than 48 hours, it's very likely that they're dead. And she let her family think this for like 22 days. Like, after 22 days, I would be assuming that the person is deceased. And to make your family go through that and to have to grapple with those thoughts is just absolutely heinous to me. Not to mention the whole racial aspect of this. So Sherri made the blog post complaining about Latinos. She says that 2 Latino women were the ones who kidnapped her. And also, this happened in November 2016, right in the heat of the Trump versus Hillary election, where Trump was demonizing the Hispanic community. So they really didn't need to take another hit. And Sherri was also contributing towards the racist idea that the Latino community is involved in drugs and kidnapping. This leads us with the final question. Why would she do this? It seems to me that Sherri loves attention, so I'm very surprised that she never did any sort of like Oprah interview. She never went on like Good Morning America to talk about her experience, but I'm sure that she was showered in attention from her friends and family. One of her friends even came forward and did an interview and was like, well, I see this as an act of love. I can't stop thinking about how much she must really love this man that she made all these lies for so that she could spend some time with him in his house. Like, this girl, I think she surrounds herself with people who buy into her lies, and if you don't, she either makes up lies about you or just completely cuts you off. My best guess is that she wanted money because they were in credit card debt, and she also had lost her job. So of course they really didn't raise that much money. It was the $30,000 from the victims fund and then the $49,000 from their GoFundMe. I mean, that's really only like a year's salary in California. So I don't really understand that aspect, but of course, maybe she was planning on writing a book eventually about her experience, or like selling the rights to like a production company to make a movie about her life. Spoiler alert if you've never seen Gone Girl. Speaking of movies, people are calling this the real life Gone Girl case because she's a blonde woman, she goes missing, she returns, her hair has been cut, and it's, you know, kind of like a fake missing persons case again. But she could at least try to make it a little bit different from the Gone Girl case, because the movie Gone Girl came out in 2014 and Sherri went missing in 2016. This gives her just the perfect amount of time to watch the movie and hatch this whole plan. As always, I would love to hear your opinion on this case. Why do you think that Sherri faked this whole kidnapping? And what do you think the proper punishment for her is? So she hasn't been sentenced yet, but she did publicly apologize for her actions. But I don't know, guys, that's not enough for me. I want to see this girl in jail. Like, 2016 was already a really hard year for the Hispanic community, and she just contributed towards further prejudice against them. She also, you know, gave everyone the like emotional trauma of being involved in a missing persons case. And she also took attention away from other missing persons cases that could use the publicity that her case got. How many cases have I covered on this channel where somebody is missing and there's not enough public attention, there's not enough money, there's not enough resources to help find them? It's been like the Akia Eggleston case, that couple that went missing in Philadelphia, the Brittany Drexel case, the Aisha Degree case. There's plenty of missing people out there who need attention, and that's why I started this channel. So for Sherri to be faking all of this for superficial reasons is just infuriating to me, and I do think that she deserves some jail time for this. But as always, I would love to hear your opinions on this case. And if you're not already subscribed to my channel and you liked this video, then please click the subscribe button to support me and my little true crime YouTube channel. I'd really, really appreciate it. And as always, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day and stay safe.